Hello, my thoughtful teenagers, and welcome to another episode of Grade 10 Maths with me, Miss Lambert. We will be looking at algebra, and under that, we're going to be looking at how you can change the subject of the formula. In order to change the subject of the formula, first we must know what is a formula and what do they mean by subject. A formula is a general equation showing the connection between two or more related quantities. Now, we change the subject of the formula. When we do that, we find the unknown variable, or we make everything equal to a specific thing. Here we have a guide that will help us to solve for the subject of the formula. In order to do that, we follow these steps. First, we look for the root and we perform the inverse. Now, the inverse of a root varies depending on what that root is. Second, we look for the division and we perform the inverse of the division. And the inverse of division is multiplication. After we would have done that, we then move on to look for addition or subtraction. And once again, in order to change or to find the subject of the formula, we continue to perform the inverse of the operation at every step. Now, point to note, if both addition and subtraction is present, we perform the addition first. After that, we look for the multiplication. Now, sometimes the multiplication will appear with a multiplication sign or it may not. So you must be keen on identifying your multiplication. When you find that, you perform the inverse, and the inverse of multiplication is division. Lastly, we look for the index or any power that is present, and we perform the inverse of that power. Now, all that talking, let's look at an example to see exactly what we are talking about. Now, let's look at a representation of the information that is given here. Now, here we have the information represented in a pair of parentheses or a pair of brackets. Here you can see that at the top there is the root, which we would look for first if there is any. Then there is the division, the addition or the subtraction. Then we have the multiplication, and we look for the index last. So these are all operations that you look for when we are performing changing the subject of a formula, and it is very important that you perform the operation as they're given here. It helps to eliminate any possible errors, and it helps you to have a more accurate answer at the end of your working. Now let's look at the example we have here. It says P is equal to 2L plus 2W, and they want us to make W the subject of the formula. Now, if we reference the information that we had before, we look for the root, division, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and then we look for the index or the power. Now, when we look at our example here, we do not have a root. We do not have a division, but we can find that there is the addition. So we perform that operation. In order to eliminate, we will need to transpose, and to do that we're basically removing 2L from one side of the equation and taking it to the other side. So here you're going to see that 2L moved from one place to another. Now once that is done, let's take a look once again at our guide. We look for the multiplication. Now you need to remember what we were making the subject of the formula. So in this example, we were making W the subject of the formula. And when we transpose 2L, we see now that W is being multiplied to 2. So in order to get rid of that, we need to perform the inverse, which is to divide. So when we divide both sides by 2, we will end up with P minus 2L divided by 2 is equal to W. And that is how we solve to find the subject, or to change the subject rather, of the formula in the equation P is equal to 2L plus 2W. Now let's take a look at another example. Now the example says A is equal to pi r square. And yes, I know you might be saying that the formula looks familiar. That is because it is the formula to find the area of a circle. But in this instance, we are transposing it to make r the subject of the formula. And we know that r is the radius. But we're not looking at area in this lesson. So let's continue. Now here we are going to be following our guidelines to transpose. So here we're going to be looking for particular aspects of our formula or our guide to solve this. Now let's take a quick look once again at our guide. It says that we look for the root. Then we look for the division. If there is none, we look for the addition or the subtraction, multiplication, and then we deal with the indices or the index. So keeping this in mind, let's take a look once again at the equation we're working with. The equation says that a is equal to pi r squared. Now we do not have a division, neither do we have an addition or a subtraction. But we can clearly see here that there is multiplication happening. So that is the first function we need to perform. And as I said, when we are transposing, we always perform the inverse operation. So we divide both sides by pi. One side, pi will equate to 1, and the other side we're going to have a over pi is equal to r squared. Now we have an index. We need to perform the inverse operation of 2. In order to do that, we will use the radical sign to equate one side to 0 and also transpose on the other side. So once we would have done that, we're going to see here that the root of a over pi is equal to r. So please remember, this guide is very important when you are transposing to change the subject of the formula. I am stressing because sometimes we might get confused with the operation, and if we perform one operation before the other, that can give you an incorrect answer. So now that you know what you need to do and in what order, you can go ahead and start transposing to changing the subject of the formula. So let's recap what we did for this lesson. We said that when we change the subject of a formula, we make everything equal to one specific thing. Now using our guide, we use that and we perform the inverse of every operation. If we can find a root, we perform the inverse of that root. If we can find division, we perform the inverse. Likewise for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and for the index. So for your homework, I would like you to reference Mathematics, a Complete Course with CXC Question, Volume 2. Exercise 13C can be found on page 708. Now, for this particular topic, there are 230 practice questions. Yes, I know that is a lot. But what I want you to do is take your time and try to work as many as possible. Simply because after every 20 or 30 questions, the complexity of each question increases. So the more practice you have working these problems, the better it's going to be for you, because you will be able to master changing the subject of the formula using every single operation that is possible. So there you have it, my thoughtful teenagers, our lesson on changing the subject of the formula. I really do hope you follow our guide so that you will be able to seamlessly change subject of formula despite the complexity of the question. I thank you for being here with me on this episode of Grade 10 Maths, and I do hope you do your homework, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.